So he speaks to us all as Americans about the economic, military, financial, and political reality that has unfolded over the past several decades, bringing us to the situation we're in today. And I know we're all going to be very, very enriched by hearing the incredible wisdom and from the incredible experience of Dr. Robert Bowman. Please give a great New York welcome to Dr. Bowman.
Thank you. I haven't done anything yet. That's great. It's good to be back here. I want to thank Les. I want to thank everybody from the New York 9/11 Truth. And I really want to thank Father Frank for hosting us here. Yet once again in this beautiful place. Now, Les mentioned that I have been sponsored by people all across the political spectrum, and that's true. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, among the sponsors were 9/11 Truth groups, peace groups, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, and many others. So we really are bringing people together, and we must, because we have been divided for all too long. We have been divided into left and right, artificially, by the big money interests, the global robber barons, if you will, who run both major political parties at the national level and most of the world. They have divided us so that we will fight against each other instead of coming together to resist them. Now, one of the ways they do this is by giving us the illusion that we have a choice in this country. They take the two major political parties and they say, well, you guys be for abortion, you be against it, you be for school prayer, you be against it, gay rights, gun control. Now, what all those hot-button issues have in common is that the wealthy elites could care less how it comes out. Those issues do not affect their bottom line, so they don't care. But on issues that they care about, going to war to secure an oil pipeline or signing an international trade agreement to drive down wages to maximize their profits, they expect both their political parties to come together and do what they're told. And for the most part, they do. For example, we know that nobody can match George W. Bush for wars of aggression, but Clinton had his too, completing the rape of Yugoslavia, giving us 70 days of bombing Kosovo in violation of the War Powers Act and the U.S. Constitution. When it comes to international trade, George W. Bush has given us CAFTA and is attempting to give us the North American Union, which would complete the job of destroying our sovereignty and making us a third world nation. Now, we're not going to let him get away with that. We're going to stop him. But it was Bill Clinton who gave us NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. And it was Al Gore, who is so marvelous on global warming, who was the hatchet man for the Clinton administration to cram NAFTA down the throats of a reluctant Congress. So we have to face the facts that when it really matters to the big money interests, both parties generally do their bidding, not ours. That's why we are where we are today. And that's what we have to stop. So we know, for example, that impeachment is not a cure-all. It won't end all our problems, even if we're able to pick off Cheney and Bush at the same time and have Nancy Pelosi become president. That's not going to solve our problems, because all too often she appears to be just as bought and paid for as the rest of them. However, there are, I think, crucial reasons why we must nevertheless go forward with impeachment. Many people say, oh, it costs too much money, it's going to disrupt everything, there's not that much time left, let's just let them serve out their terms, get rid of them. No, no, no. They still have a year and a half to do more evil around the world. For whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you, Cheney Bush. We have to prevent them from doing another false flag attack, perhaps sinking one of our own aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf and blaming it on Iran as an excuse for launching a nuclear war of aggression against Iran. We cannot let that happen. Another reason for pursuing impeachment that relates to that is that if Cheney and Bush are impeached and are standing trial in the Senate, even if that drags on and drags on, our military commanders in the Pentagon are not going to attack Iran on the orders of people under impeachment for abusing their privileges. Yet another reason is that we have to send a message to future presidents that they cannot become despots. We will not put up with dictators. We will bring them down. Still another reason is that we, the American people, have to send a message to the people of the world that we do not support the evil done by those folks in our name. Now, some people say, well, after impeachment, what? I'd like to give you a vision of one possible future, a positive future. And that's what my talk's about tonight, is a vision of what could be. Not necessarily what will be, but what could be and what we need to strive toward, I think. Now, I had hoped to be able to speak to you tonight as Congressman Bob Bowman. That didn't happen. I did win my primary against a self-proclaimed middle-of-the-road mainstream Democrat named John Kennedy. But I lost the general election to a 7-term incumbent Republican and his Diebold touchscreen voting machines. If they still have those dumb machines, I might not run next time. By the way, that 7-term incumbent Republican congressman originally ran on term limits. Now, since I can't address you as Congressman Bob Bowman, I've decided to address you as President Bob Bowman. I'm going to ask you to pretend that I am addressing you as President of the United States and giving my State of the Union address shortly after inauguration. Your role is to play members of Congress, the Supreme Court, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Cabinet, various visiting dignitaries. And in accordance with that, of course, as always, your task is to clap and cheer like crazy when you hear something you agree with, and sit on your hands when you don't. The reason for that, of course, is to let the American people watching on television know what it is they're supposed to believe. Seated behind me are the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, who, of course, is also the Vice President of the United States. Madam Speaker, Madam President, distinguished members of Congress, honored guests, and my fellow Americans. The United States is unquestionably #1 in the industrialized world, #1 in our use of the world's resources, #1 in the production of pollution, #1 in the gap between the rich and the poor, #1 in deaths by gunfire, #1 in teen pregnancy, #1 in poverty among the elderly, #1 in citizens without health coverage, #1 in child poverty, #1 in homeless veterans, and #1 in citizens behind bars. We are the world's #1 debtor nation. #1 in the creation of new billionaires, #1 in school dropouts, #1 in poverty, homelessness, hunger, divorce, suicide, and oh yes, #1 in military force, nuclear weapons, and military spending, as much as all the other nations in the world combined. We also lead the world in the number of hours worked per family, since it now takes 2 wage earners and 3 jobs to bring in the same income you could get with 1 job working 40 hours a week in the 1950s. Despite soaring productivity, real wages in this country are now 1/3 of what they were in the 1950s. If it wasn't for corporate control of our government and the resulting trickle-down economics, ordinary workers could support their families working 1 job, 2 days a week. Would you like to have a 5-day weekend every week? If worker pay had kept up with executive pay, ordinary workers on the shop floor today would be making $1 million a year. And the minimum wage would be $171 an hour. What do you call a country in which the gap between the rich and the poor grows beyond bounds, whose principal exports are wood pulp and scrap metal, whose principal imports are manufactured goods, and whose fastest growing industry is the construction and operation of private prisons? I think you could call it a third world country, and that is the State of the Union we have inherited. In our government's drive to protect the far-flung financial interests of multinational corporations. We have abandoned our principles and fought wars of aggression against small countries. We have overthrown popularly elected leaders and installed puppet dictators who sell out their own people to our corporations. In our drive toward a corporate New World Order, we have sold out our workers, our families, our environment, our children's futures, and the American dream. This, too, is the State of the Union we have inherited. Now, we had the opportunity to create a land without want. What went wrong? Why are our workers paid such a tiny percentage of their true worth? Why are we the only major nation without a national health program? Why are our high school graduates 2 years behind their counterparts in other countries? Why are we hated by so many around the world? Why do we have hundreds of thousands of troops patrolling foreign lands and supporting foreign dictators? What's going on? Well, the answer, I'm afraid, is that we have lost our republic. Legislators no longer represent the people who elect them, but the corporations who finance them. They answer not to their constituents, but to the lobbyists who line their pockets and fill their campaign coffers. For years now, through both major political parties, the world's billionaires have directed U.S. policy for their own personal profit. This has included agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, and the World Trade Organization, falsely portrayed as supporting free trade, but in reality, promoting free investment, overturning U.S. laws, and putting American workers in competition with those in the Third World. NAFTA, for example, has destroyed the standard of living and the quality of life on both sides of the Rio Grande. And by driving Mexican farmers off the land, is largely responsible for the flood of illegal immigrants into our country. Corporate control of our government has also resulted in a series of wars, from Iraq to Bosnia to Kosovo to Afghanistan to Iraq again. Wars which are never in the interest of those fighting them or of the families left behind. Wars which only serve the insatiable greed of the global investor class. Corporate power over our political system, over the media, and over most aspects of our lives is the greatest danger we face today. Those of us who dedicate our lives to peace, economic justice, and environmental preservation can make little progress in our struggles so long as ultimate power is in the hands of those who profit from war, poverty, and pollution. Well, I didn't get here tonight by taking corporate millions. I didn't get here by selling myself to the oil companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the insurance companies. To be quite honest, I'm not sure how I got here. But here I am, and as long as I am President of the United States, this government will serve the needs of the people, not the greeds of the wealthy elite. Now, turning things around won't be easy. What our Constitution empowers me to change, I shall. But for much of what needs doing, I will need the cooperation of you in Congress, and I ask for it tonight. The Constitution does not make me the decider. Only the proposer and the implementer. You, the people's representatives, are the deciders. I am therefore vacating all the over 800 signing statements imposed by my predecessor. I'm revoking a host of presidential directives, including number 20 and number 51, which give me dictatorial powers. I ask for the repeal of the misnamed Patriot Act. And all the martial law and special and dictatorial powers acts passed in the last 7 years. This is not a monarchy. But I warn you, members of Congress, if you continue to violate your constitutional responsibility to serve your constituents and instead serve only yourselves and the big money interests you are indebted to, if you continue to ignore the Constitution and attempt to protect the crooked, corporate-dominated status quo, I will go over your heads to the American people and ask them to retire, all of you, regardless of party. We must sever the connection between big money and political power. This means electoral reform and media reform. Now, the latter can be done now. I have ordered the Federal Communications Commission to reinstate the Fairness Doctrine and the Equal Time Rules and to re-implement the ban on multiple ownership of the media. A free press is incompatible with corporate monopoly domination of the media. Now, electoral reform is a little more complicated. The immediate need is for paper ballots. We also need instant runoff voting, proportional representation, the elimination of burdensome petition requirements for qualifying third-party and independent candidates, making Election Day a federal holiday so working people can actually vote, and of course, true campaign finance reform. Once we succeed in separating big money and political power, then everything becomes possible. In this richest of nations, we can and we will guarantee every American access to a good education, a decent job at a living wage, health care, and the undiluted protections of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. As a conservative, I believe that the only fiscally responsible way to provide universal health care is to kick the insurance companies out of health care completely. This eliminates their overhead, their profit, which account for about half of every health care dollar, their bean counting and their interference between doctor and patient. And I therefore propose a doctor-run, single-payer national health program. As a step toward the living wage, I propose that the minimum wage be indexed for inflation and over a 10-year period be raised to what it would have been had it been so indexed at its inception, currently over $14 an hour. Now, as you know, the previous administration resigned under threat of impeachment. They were being impeached over their exploitation of the 9/11 tragedy to deceive this nation into unnecessary and illegal wars of aggression. And they are still awaiting court-martial on charges of abusing their authority as Commander-in-Chief. Now, the evidence of their guilt is overwhelming. This evidence is in the PNAC document calling for the permanent occupation of Iraq justified by a new Pearl Harbor. It is in Richard Clarke's book in which he notes an immediate attempt by the Bush administration to tie Iraq to 9/11, regardless of the facts. It is in videotaped statements by Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld themselves using 9/11 to attempt to justify the Iraq War. It is in CIA documents showing that Wolfowitz, Pearl, Libby, Thief, and others cherry-picked intelligence for use by Cheney and their other bosses. It is in the Downing Street memo, which notes that the intelligence was being tailored to fit the policy. And it is in speeches by me and others prior to the invasion of Iraq in which we lay out the truth, predicted the inevitable results, and noted that such an invasion would be an impeachable offense and an act of treason. Now, there is also evidence of a massive cover-up with respect to 9/11 itself. The official 9/11 report, tightly controlled by the White House, amounts to little but a gigantic whitewash. When combined with the confiscation of videotapes, audio tapes, black boxes, and other evidence by the FBI, it is clear that regardless of who was responsible for 9/11, the subsequent cover-up was itself a conspiracy involving elements of the White House and the intelligence establishment. Now, this cover-up evidence, this is important because remember, Richard Nixon wasn't undone by the 2-bit break-in at the Watergate, but for the cover-up. Bill Clinton wasn't impeached for his sexual encounters with Monica Lewinsky, but for stretching the truth when asked about it. Scooter Libby wasn't convicted for leaking Valerie Plane's identity, but for lying about when he learned about it. And Martha Stewart didn't serve time for insider trading, but for not telling the truth. Is there anyone who believes that the Bush administration always told the truth about 9/11? This raises the question, if the Bush administration had nothing to hide, why did they hide everything? Were they covering up guilt or incompetence? If it was guilt, who were the guilty parties? Were they Saudis, Pakistanis, Israelis, Americans, all of the above? If it was incompetence, why was no one demoted or fired or court-martialed or even reprimanded? And why on earth aren't the people's representatives in Congress asking these questions and demanding answers? The American people have still not been told who was really responsible for 9/11. But dedicated researchers have proven that it could not have happened the way the Bush administration said it did. Hijacked airliners do not fly around for an hour and 40 minutes without being intercepted. Unless our air defense system was deliberately sabotaged. Indestructible black boxes. And of course they're not really black, they're bright orange, but indestructible black boxes do not evaporate in the same fire from which unharmed passports float to the street below. Steel skyscrapers do not implode and collapse at free-fall speed because of a kerosene fire. Steel buildings do not collapse at all because of a kerosene fire. Never have and never will. And Building 7 was never struck by an airplane. I'd like to show you a 3-minute DVD on just one of hundreds of issues.
Number 7 at the World Trade Center was a 47-story building with a steel frame. No airplane crashed into it, nor did the towers fall onto it. However, this building disintegrated on September 11th.
Building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing, and indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were, and it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know, but New York very much a city still in chaos. The foes... who already owned World Trade Center 7, signs a $3.2 billion, 99-year lease on the entire World Trade Center complex 6 weeks before 9/11. Included in the lease is a $3.5 billion insurance policy, specifically covering acts of terrorism.
PBS has a documentary called America Rebuilds, in which Larry Silverstein, the landlord of Building 7, explains what happened.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, I've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
controlled demolition. Okay, that's it. You can turn the equipment off. Well, in 3 minutes, there you have it. You have seen BBC announce the collapse of Building 7 10 to 20 minutes before it happened. You have seen Larry Silverstein explaining why he made the decision to pull Building 7, which in industry parlance means initiate a controlled demolition. And you've seen the building itself come down. There are millions of 9/11 truthers around the country who believe that this is a smoking gun which proves 9/11 was an inside job. Well, that's a good time. But you know, even if they're wrong, even if the official Bush conspiracy theory is essentially correct, you know, the one about 19 Arabs with box cutters and an old man on a dialysis machine in a cave. Even if that official conspiracy theory is essentially correct, the American people still need to know, for example, why their multi-trillion-dollar defense establishment was unable to protect even their own headquarters from an unarmed aircraft. The truth about 9/11 is that after 6 years, we still don't know the truth about 9/11, and we should. I am therefore appointing a new and truly independent commission to investigate 9/11. It will have oversight by a few of you in Congress, Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich, by Senator Max Cleland, by Dr. David Ray Griffin of the 9/11 Truth Movement, by Karen Breitweiser and Mindy Kleinberg representing the families of victims, and by Sybil Edmonds and other whistleblowers in the FBI. They will have full subpoena power, able to require sworn public testimony from anyone up to and including me and the previous president and vice president. You know, I think we've had enough so-called testimony behind closed doors with no oaths and no transcripts. This time we want the truth. The new commission will examine all the evidence, even that which seems to contradict the official story, and there's a mountain of it. And they will have no predetermined conclusions about who the conspirators were. I've told them not to even assume that Cheney is guilty. There have been all too many Pearl Harbors, Gulfs of Tonkin, 9/11s, and Reichstag fires. We must make it clear that the truth will out. Never again must we allow this nation to be stampeded into war under false pretenses. Speaking of war, the new Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I have redefined two basic missions for our armed forces: deterring anyone from attacking the United States with weapons of mass destruction, and defending our shores and borders from foreign invasion. Period. This redefinition of mission will, after a few years of transition, result in a peace dividend of $400 billion per year, with no one joining the ranks of the jobless. Until new contracts come out for renewable energy, non-polluting transportation, and the rebuilding of our infrastructure, there are to be no layoffs. If we can pay farmers not to grow crops, we can pay engineers and machinists not to build weapons. And among the new weapons we will pay them not to build are new nuclear weapons and Star Wars weapons in space. Now, the part of the defense budget which is absolutely inviolable is that part which takes care of our veterans. The VA must be fully funded. The cost of caring for the disabled veterans from the Iraq War alone will be in the trillions of dollars over their lifetimes. But it is a cost we must bear. The signature wound of this war has been brain trauma, and yet the Bush administration slashed the funding for the Brain Trauma Center by 50%. To create so many thousands of new disabled veterans in their wars of aggression and then refuse to take proper care of them was perhaps the worst sin of the Bush administration. The care of those wounded in action, racked by PTSD, and poisoned by depleted uranium is not a discretionary expenditure to be avoided by delayed denial and bureaucratic red tape. It is a solemn obligation of this government, and it will be met. In the last half a century, the United States has gone from savior of the civilized world to the #1 rogue nation on earth. As a result, despite spending $1.5 billion a day on military power, the American people today are less secure than at any time since the end of the Civil War. The expenditure of $14 trillion since World War II has brought the American people only more insecurity, massive debt, and the loss of many of the cherished rights enshrined in our Constitution. It's time for the cycle to end. It's time to end the belligerence, bring home our troops, and rejoin the family of nations. And that's what we're going to do. To set the stage for discussing our plans for Iraq, I'd like to give you a little historical background. First, I'd like to read a few excerpts from a speech I gave to an anti-war rally on February 15, 2003, a month before the Iraq War started. Saddam Hussein is a bad guy. He's a bad guy now. He was a bad guy in 1990 when April Glaspie of the State Department gave him a green light to invade Kuwait. He was a bad guy in the 1980s when Donald Rumsfeld sat down with him for a chat while Saddam was supposedly gassing the Kurds. He was a bad guy in 1977 when Zbigniew Brzezinski met with him and proposed the invasion of Iran. And he was a bad guy in the 1960s when the CIA hired him to assassinate Iraqi leader Abdel Karim Qasem and then helped Saddam take over Iraq. He's always been a bad guy, but he was always our bad guy. Right up to 1990, official Department of Defense documents praised Saddam for vastly improving the education, medical care, and standard of living of his people, along with women's rights and religious freedom. His regime was called one of the most enlightened, progressive governments in the region, and it was. But there was a problem. The Berlin Wall had come down, and the Soviet Union had collapsed. The first Bush White House needed to find another bad guy fast to justify the defense budget. And they did, Saddam Hussein. They suckered him into attacking Kuwait, and the first Gulf War was on. Now the second President Bush wants his Gulf War too. But starting a preemptive war against Iraq would be immoral, would be costly in terms of American lives and in dollars. Hasn't that one come true? Would require us to keep troops in Iraq indefinitely, would come between us and our allies, would incense the Arab world, would provide Osama bin Laden with thousands of new recruits, and would therefore vastly increase the terrorist threat. As a combat veteran, I will not stand idly by and watch our security destroyed by a president who went AWOL rather than fight in Vietnam. You know, when I joined the Air Force, I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that includes a renegade president. If they go ahead with this war, I will call for the impeachment of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and the whole oil mafia. This war would be treason. God bless America and God save us from George W. Bush. Now that was February 15th, 2003. A month later, troops were massed in Kuwait, but shock and awe hadn't yet started. This is a little of what I said on March 15th, 2003, on the eve of the Iraq War. I've been severely criticized for speaking out in opposition to this coming war. We're told that we're aiding and abetting the enemy. We're told we should support the president no matter what. Well, I say hogwash. I feel an affinity for the troops deployed in Kuwait. They're my comrades in arms. But the truth is, they're not over there protecting our freedoms. Our freedoms are not under attack by Saddam Hussein. Our freedoms are under attack by John Ashcroft. They are threatened by John Poindexter. They are trampled by Donald Rumsfeld. They are disdained by Dick Cheney. And they are not even understood by George W. Bush. The troops surrounding Iraq are not protecting us. We are protecting them and their honor and their freedoms by speaking truth to power. And here is the truth that we proclaim. This coming war has nothing to do with national security or democracy or freedom or human rights or protecting our allies or weapons of mass destruction or defeating terrorists or disarming Iraq. It has to do with money, it has to do with oil, and it has to do with raw imperial power, and it's wrong. A preemptive war would be immoral, illegal, unconstitutional, a war crime against the people of Iraq, and treason against the United States of America. Now that was March 15th, 2003, on the eve of the Iraq War. Now, the point of this bit of history is that we in the peace movement knew better. We weren't taken in by the doctrine and manipulated intelligence and the outright falsehoods we were told to justify this war. Just one more little bit of history. I'd like to quote briefly from the memoirs of the first President Bush, written before his son got the job. Quote, "Trying to eliminate Saddam would have incurred incalculable human and political costs. We would have been forced to occupy Baghdad and, in effect, rule Iraq. There was no viable exit strategy we could see. Had we gone the invasion route, the United States could conceivably still be an occupying power in a bitterly hostile land," unquote. My sisters and brothers, it's too darn bad his son doesn't read. Should have paid attention to Daddy. Well, now here we are, 4 years and 3,600 American lives later. This misguided war has cost more American lives than 9/11 and has dragged on longer than World War II. Yet we still have no accountability for how this war started. Oh, we know that most of you lily-livered members of Congress of both parties abdicated your constitutional responsibility to declare war, or not, and handed a blank check to the imperial presidency. We also know you were lied to by George W. Bush and his people, but what I can't figure out is how you believed those lies. I sure didn't. Are the members of Congress that much more stupid than we in the peace movement? Or maybe, did you really know better, but we're just being lapdogs for the fat cats as usual? Well, in 2006, the Democrats took control of Congress. And months went by. And months went by. And still, you failed to hold President Bush accountable for his lies. What on earth was wrong with you? It's a hackneyed expression, and I know you've heard it, but it's true. Clinton lied, no one died. If it was okay to impeach Bill Clinton for fibbing about an event which only embarrassed his family and soiled a blue dress, what took you so long to impeach Cheney and Bush for deceiving us into a war costing so many thousands of lives? Where is the accountability? If it was right for Richard Nixon to have to resign under threat of impeachment for covering up an attempt to peek at the other party's plans, why was it not right for you to immediately get rid of those responsible not just for the 2 deadly wars of aggression, but for the loss of habeas corpus, spying on American citizens, torturing suspects in the phony war on terror, saddling our grandchildren with more trillions in debt, giving away our sovereignty, for goodness sakes, with the North American Union, and subverting the Constitution itself? Where is the accountability? Much changed while George W. Bush was in office. Nearly 3,000 died on 9/11. Many more than that died in his wars and occupations. There are more than 26,000 wounded soldiers whose lives will never be the same. There are tens of thousands of young men and women with serious psychological problems because of what they have seen and what they have done. There are hundreds of thousands poisoned by depleted uranium who will suffer lives of pain and disability, and who will father thousands of children with severe birth defects. Our military services are depleted and demoralized. The VA system is overwhelmed. The National Guard and Reserves have been subjected to tour after tour, disrupting lives for even the lucky ones who return unscathed. Jobs have been lost. Marriages have been destroyed. Homes have been foreclosed. Children have been estranged. And natural disasters like Katrina have been undealt with. And still, there was no accountability. And that was just in this country. In Iraq, of course, it was much worse. Religious liberty was lost. Mosques, churches, and synagogues, which thrived under Saddam, were destroyed, their people killed or scattered. Women lost their rights and freedoms. Essential services were disrupted. People have been tortured. Hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians have been killed. Cities like Fallujah lie in ruins. And in spite of heroic efforts by the vast majority of our young men and women in uniform, most of the remaining people of Iraq are much worse off than they were before we liberated them. More than 4 years of war destroyed Iraq, destroyed our standing in the world, destroyed our national security, destroyed our civil liberties, destroyed precious lives, and brought our nation to the brink of financial disaster. And it was all predictable because we, in fact, predicted it. The hundreds of billions of dollars already spent on this war have not just vanished. They've gone to Condoleezza Rice's Chevron Texaco, and Dick Cheney's Halliburton, and George Bush's Carlyle Group, and then through their lobbyists into the pockets of you congressional incumbents. Perhaps that's why there was no accountability. But no more. The American people finally got together and demanded a government which follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. And that's exactly what we intend to give them. I have asked the United Nations to send peacekeepers to Iraq to do the job that we can't do as an occupying army. But whether or not they do, we will leave completely within 3 months. We are going to support what's left of our troops by bringing them home while they're still alive. Now, terrorism is a real threat. In the short term, we must protect the American people from the terrorists our misguided policies have already created. This means enhancing port security, beefing up the Coast Guard and the Border Patrol. These things we will do. But in the long term, we must stop making more terrorists. Now, we have at times, including I think the last few years, had a government with bad policies. But we are a good people. What we have long needed is a government which reflects the values and goodness of the American people. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which violates international law in its conflicts and denies its own citizens their constitutional rights. I have therefore ordered the release of all those being detained without charge. The closure of the prison at Guantanamo Bay. We'll find somewhere else for Bush and Cheney. And the end of the rendition program in which suspects are kidnapped and then taken to secret foreign prisons to be tortured. all contracts for mercenaries, all contracts with Blackwater are being canceled. This includes contracts with the DOD, the CIA, and the Department of Homeland Security, which, by the way, is being abolished. I have also pardoned a host of political prisoners, including Border Patrol agents jailed for 12 years for doing their job against a Mexican drug smuggler bringing in 700 pounds of cocaine across the border. Agents Campion and Ramos are now free. I have also pardoned Leonard Peltier and and I've given a blanket pardon to all those convicted of the possession or use of small amounts of marijuana. I have to admit to you, however, I have not pardoned Scooter Libby. He's going to have to at least pay his fine. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which promotes a globalization which depresses living standards at home and allows corporations to destroy the quality of life in banana republics and client states all over the world. The WTO, the World Bank, and the IMF has caused untold suffering. If we can't reform them, we will abolish them. With respect to our relationship with the government of Mexico, I have ordered the cancellation of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, or North American Union. Abandonment of plans for a NAFTA superhighway, which would have put almost all our longshoremen and truckers out of work. And suspension of NAFTA completely until Mexico gives its workers union rights, protections for safety, health, and the environment, and wages at least matching the U.S. federal minimum wage. There's not going to be a pool of cheap labor driving down wages in this country. From now on, globalization will mean raising living standards in developing nations to match ours, not the other way around. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a system in which all our personal income taxes go to pay interest on a staggering national debt created out of thin air. The Constitution gives Congress the authority to print our money, not a private cartel mostly owned by the I ask Congress to pass legislation abolishing the Federal Reserve. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which uses our money to train death squads in the techniques of torture, intimidation, and assassination. The School of the Americas, by whatever name they choose to call it, will be closed. And by the way, as Commander-in-Chief, I have ordered that the students currently attending the school be shown the movies Romero and Panama Deception and then sent home. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which gives most favored nation status to the butchers of Tiananmen Square and places an illegal secondary embargo on the impoverished people of Cuba. The embargo of Cuba must end, and it just did. I recognize that we need advance information on the activities of Al-Qaeda and those who wish to do us harm. But our values and goodness are not reflected by, and our security is not enhanced by, an organization which promotes instability, insurrection, tyranny, torture, terrorism, murder, and war around the world in our name and with our money. If the CIA doesn't stick to gathering intelligence, I will abolish it. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which sends its working class youth around the world to kill the sons and daughters of working people in other countries. Our values and goodness are not reflected by sending our children to the Middle East to kill Arabs so the oil companies can profit by selling the oil under other people's sand, making us the target of terrorists. No more Iraqs, no more Kosovos, no more El Salvadors. These are not just isolated incidents of stupidity. They're part of a long, bloody history of foreign policy being conducted for the financial interests of the wealthy few. It is a new form of colonialism. It violates our Constitution. It endangers our national security. It mortgages our future. It sacrifices our children. And it must stop. And it just did. As president, I will use the men and women in our armed forces to protect our borders and our people, not the financial interests of Folgers, Chiquita Banana, Exxon, and Halliburton. Now, needless to say, there will be no nuclear attack on Iran. My special envoy to the Middle East, Jimmy Carter, will be meeting with them to iron out our differences. And once he has finished there, he will straighten out the Israelis and the Palestinians. You know, with over 60 years having passed since the end of World War II and with the Cold War long since over, I see no reason why we should still be occupying Germany and Japan. Our global military presence will end within 2 years. This is not isolationism, it's common sense. It is in the security interest of our people, and it is obeying our Constitution for a change. Instead of a worldwide military presence, we're going to have a humanitarian presence. Along with the other wealthy nations of the world, we shall initiate a new Marshall Plan, providing funds to rebuild the Middle East as we rebuilt Europe after World War II. We will also have a domestic Marshall Plan, fulfilling the unkept Bush promises to rebuild New Orleans and the surrounding area. In addition, we will take the lead in complete debt forgiveness for the poorest countries, starting with those in Africa. If we are once again to be a great nation, we must first be a good nation. Finally, I'd like to speak directly to the American people. I understand that I am but an interim president. I could never have been elected under the present system. I know I tried in 2000. And I'm unlikely to even finish out this term, partly because I have terminal cancer from Agent Orange, and partly because there are powerful interests who have hundreds of billions of reasons for wanting me assassinated. By the way, if you ever hear that I have suddenly committed suicide by shooting myself in the back with a shotgun 3 times, you might want to be just a little bit suspicious. They'll call you a conspiracy theorist, but be suspicious anyway. But you know, it won't matter. They can kill me, but they can't kill what we started. It's too late for that. My words, heard tonight by a few, will tomorrow reach many. Through the internet, the vision of the patriots will spread across the land and around the world. You, the American people, will not let it die. Can you wait on that for just a couple minutes more, please? I'm unlikely to get there with you, but like Brother Martin, I have a job paying a living wage. It's an America in which single parents can freely choose to stay home to care for their children, or to choose to work outside the home in the knowledge that their children will be cared for in a safe and nurturing environment. It's an America in which health care is provided to all as a right. It's an America in which our youth spend 2 years in the American World Service Corps, perhaps serving in the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps or Habitat for Humanity or any one of many worthy organizations in exchange for their higher education. It's an America in which education is freely available to all, including whatever advanced education the person is successfully handling, and in which educators and teachers are highly valued and financially compensated accordingly. It is an America in which policemen, nurses, firefighters, poets, teachers, and garbage collectors can afford a good house in a nice neighborhood and live in comfort. The same as scientists, brain surgeons, CEOs, rock stars, and basketball players. It's an America whose borders are secure, immigrants are legal, and workers are amply compensated. It's an America in which faith is respected, culture is preserved, the arts are supported, and the Constitution is followed. It's an America that seeks not to be king of the hill, nor subservient to the World Trade Organization, but to be a responsible, sovereign member of the family of nations. Nothing more and nothing less. An America that is free of the threat of terrorism because it is no longer feared and hated. An America that leads the world, not just with military might, but with its vision, its compassion, its democracy, its freedom, its standard of living, its care for the global environment, its treatment of its own people, and its goodness. Above all, it is an America at peace with the world and with its own people. That's the America I have seen. The America our people deserve. The America You can build. And you don't need me to do it. Just spread the word. Keep the dream alive. Drop your own pebbles in the pond and make some waves. Never vote for any politician who takes money from corporations or lobbyists. Never elect a president who raises $100 million from special interests or who is the darling of the corporate media. If you can't find anyone worth voting for, run for office yourself. Cleave to your sisters and brothers all across the political spectrum in demanding the basic reforms I have outlined tonight. And never settle for anything less than government of the people, by the people, and especially for the people. My old friend William Sloane Coffin used to say, and I know he didn't make this up, but he quoted it in every speech, he said, "He who makes peaceful change impossible makes violent revolution inevitable." Let us be thankful for our many blessings and pray that this, our inevitable second American Revolution, will continue to be a nonviolent one. It matters not if my presidency is real or fanciful. My part is done. It is finished. The rest is in your hands. The future and the dream itself depend on you. May God sustain you in your struggles and bless America through your actions. Thank you, everyone. At the beginning, my First Lady, Maggie, gave you a Patriots card and a sign-up card. If you didn't receive them, raise your hands and she'll get them to you. And if you need a pen to fill out the sign-up card, she has a few that she can loan you. Please get them back to us. Now, we're going to institute a couple of new traditions this evening. This will be the first State of the Union address, followed by a question and answer period. It will also be the first State of the Union address, followed by taking up a collection. Maggie will go around collecting the cards when you've finished with them, and also whatever donation you wish to make to the Patriots. If we successfully get your email address on this card and get it transcribed into our computer, you will receive a copy of this State of the Union address in its final form. It changes a little bit every night. We're continuing to improve it, update it, but you will get it. However, be very careful with your handwriting. If we can't read it and we get even one letter wrong, it won't work. And we will never know why. And you won't hear from us. And you will never know why. So please print carefully, especially on your email address. Now, the Patriots is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Joining the Patriots, signing up this card, doesn't cost you anything. There are no dues. It doesn't commit you to anything. All it says is that you want a government that follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. It doesn't say that you agree with my other policy proposals. But we are a nonprofit organization Everything you give to the Patriots is tax deductible. If you'd like to write a check, please just make it to the Patriots, and you can drop it in the basket along with your card. If you haven't finished your card when the basket comes around, you can drop it in the basket later or hand it to Maggie or to me. We in the Patriots have no salaries. Everything you give goes to pay the expenses of our tour and our other outreach expenses. We have had this videotaped many times, including professional videotape with 3 cameras and editing, and we are hoping to gather enough money to make tens of thousands of copies of these DVDs and distribute them to you that want them, and then allow you to reproduce the DVDs freely and distribute them as much as you want. You have to help us reach the American people. We can only reach the few. You have to reach the rest. And I am open for your questions. Yes?
If you had not been successful and been able to run successfully for president, who would you have wanted to see in your place in 2008?
Well, in 2000, after Pat Buchanan stole the nomination from me through the courts because I had it and stole the $12.5 million in federal funding that went with it, I supported Ralph Nader in that election. However, in 2004, I thought his campaign was sort of silly and counterproductive. I am not supporting anybody in particular this time. I am just cautioning against going with those who are bought and paid for. We have to educate the American people not to vote for those that the corporate media tells you are the most electable. Not to vote for those who raise the most money. Not to vote for those who have the most charisma on television. Vote for the people who will serve your interests and the interests of the rest of the American people.
What do you believe about the creation of a new political party in the United States and the idea of instant runoff voting that you mentioned, which may make it possible for the first time to have that party gain as many votes as there are backup votes within the system?
I certainly would like to see powerful third parties arise, and as you mentioned, that can only happen when we have instant runoff voting and get rid of burdensome petition requirements. One of the problems...
Would you mind explaining that to the people? Would you mind explaining that idea?
Okay, well, instant runoff voting is where you can vote for your first choice, your second choice, your third choice for president or whatever other office. And then if your first choice doesn't get it, then your second choice becomes your vote. For example, in the last election, a person could have voted for the Libertarian candidate or the Green candidate or somebody, and then their second choice could have been John Kerry or whatever. In previous elections, they could have voted for me, they could have voted for Pat Buchanan, Ralph Nader, and still voted for Al Gore over what's his name if they wanted to. And when Ross Perot was running, he got 19% of the vote. But in exit polls, when people asked who they really wanted to see elected, Perot got over 50%. And when they were asked, well, then why didn't you vote for him? And they said, I didn't want to throw away my vote. If you have instant runoff voting, you don't have to worry. You are never throwing away your vote. So that's what that idea is. Yes?
You mentioned that no one died on the thing. What about
sorry, I can't understand you.
You said no one's going under. What about the green degree? What about water? What about the very mysterious death of Bill Clinton? What about Ron Brown and Kosovo?
Are you talking about Bill Clinton?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I called for the impeachment of Bill Clinton over the rape of Yugoslavia, not over Monica Lewinsky. When I said Clinton lied, no one died, I was talking about the reason he got impeached, nothing else.
Another candidate that isn't paid and brought for his name is Ron Paul.
I'm sorry, I can't understand you. I'll have to go on to somebody else. Yes. You'll have to stand up and speak louder.
Is this war machinery going to take over control of our lives? Are we going to sit back and continue that?
Well, I'm certainly not sitting back and letting them do whatever they want, and I'm trying to wake up the American people so they won't either. When it comes to the arms trade, I have long said that the United States should not be the provider of arms to the world. And I don't think, well, I have also long said we should not be providing Israel with any form of assistance until they agree to return to their pre-1967 borders. I'm all for it if you can find a way to do it. Absolutely.
Colonel, would you agree that the major obstacle to true movement, particularly about 9/11 specifically, is the media, the corporate control media? If so, what would they do?
Well, sure. Well, again, I know that since I'm not president, I cannot re-implement the ban on multiple ownership and reinstate the equal time rules and whatnot to straighten out the corporate media. At this point, all we can do, besides attempting to support whatever family-owned media there is, and there's very little of it anymore, and supporting the independent media, is to use the internet and support the very few people on television that tell things that the rest of the media will not. I mean, Lou Dobbs on CNN is one. Certainly John Daly is another. I mean, we do have people that we're getting a little bit of the truth from. And, but it's going to be difficult for us. We have to buck the corporate media until we can get them reformed, undo the Reagan Revolution where he let them unleashed. And but we need to alert our fellow Americans that they are getting manipulated and brainwashed by the corporate media.
In addition to talking about all the crimes that we've gone through, the Bush administration, 9/11, Ground Zero.
Sure.
Christy Todd Whitman, who said the air is safe to breathe, and the cover-up that has gone on, because one of my friends is one of those workers, and she has told me that over 100 people have died, and we know maybe 2 or 3 that we heard in the media. And I believe that by the time we get to the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we will have lost tens of thousands of people, which will be much more than we lost on the day of 9/11. We need to remember those people as well, and the crimes committed in the cover-up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, for you dog lovers out there, and I'm one, I've got a German Shepherd, think of all those German Shepherd rescue dogs who lost their lives by breathing that stuff too.
I want to thank you for a wonderful, inspiring talk. I thought it was a brilliant analysis of our problems and with great solutions. My question is a little narrow. How do we deal with the 9/11 left gatekeepers like Alexander Coburn, Noam Chomsky, and Amy Goodman?
Okay, well, how do we deal with the left gatekeepers? First of all, I think there are some differences. Coburn actually did a hit piece, and that's one thing. Amy Goodman has, for the most part, just been totally silent on it, which is a little different. We need to work on these folks gently and rationally, but I think we also need to get our own act together. There have been too much infighting between factions in the 9/11 truth. And frankly, a lot of that stuff makes it look like we're the kooks they call us. And we should stop that. We have to understand that in the 9/11 truth movement, you don't have to invent a whole conspiracy theory and then go out attempting to prove it. That's not our job. The government's job is to prove their stupid conspiracy theory. All we have to do is blow holes in it, and we've already done that. And that's all we need to do. We should stand together in simply saying the government story doesn't make sense and we want a new investigation.
Dr. Bowman, I was saddened to hear that you are on borrowed time. I didn't know that. But on your belt, the amount of borrowed time that you have, would you consider being the 9th commissioner on our commission for New York City?
I think Les has already talked to me about that, and I'd be happy to do that. Wow. Okay. You can see there were a lot of people who died on 9/11, a lot more than were accounted for. People often ask me, you know, how come the insurance company so quickly paid off Silverstein instead of investigating this thing as insurance fraud, which it sure seems to be. And I think the answer is that the insurance companies were bought off by the government. The government paid taxpayer money to the families of victims and required them to sign a piece of paper saying that they would never sue anybody over it and give up their rights. So the government protected the insurance companies from a lot more liability than the $3.5 billion liability they had to Silverstein. And I think that's the answer to that one. I can't take any more questions because we've run out of our time, and I was supposed to quit 5 minutes ago. But I do want to say that I was absolutely serious about you going out and dropping your own pebbles in the pond and making waves. I cannot take back America. You can. Okay? We must take back America, and we will take back America. Thank you.
Folks, hang on for about 5 minutes. Just hang in with us for about 5 minutes. We can have something more very, very special coming up. Okay? And everybody agree that what I said earlier came true, that we would be enriched? Yeah. Yeah. This is what commitment looks like. Commitment to principles, commitment to truth, commitment to the true American values. And I knew that this would be just a memorable lecture given to us. So, folks, just hang with us for about 5 minutes, please. Keep a little quiet over there. We have something else to offer to you, folks. Something special that you will also be very impressed by. First, I just have a couple quick announcements, folks. We are embarked on something that's groundbreaking here in New York. It's called the NYC Ballot Initiative. Now, a ballot initiative is the true form of democracy. Usually when we go to the polls and vote, we vote for a candidate, right? When the candidate gets in office, we're all happy. If it's our candidate, we're all celebratory. We think, wow, we're going to get our issues taken care of, right? Then a month later, 2 months, 3 months later, it's business as usual. Am I right? You know, have you seen any major changes since the midterm elections when the Democrats took the majority? No. If anything, we have been greatly disillusioned, and after all that work. So, that's what we get when we vote for candidates. But how about when we vote for an issue? That's what a ballot initiative is about. And a Democratic candidate for president named Mike Gravel has done an awful lot of work on this, and he calls it Democracy by Initiative, where through the charters of various cities and states, you can literally put an issue on the ballot.
Listen up, folks.
You can put an issue on the ballot through the petition process. That's what we're doing here right in New York. We have a ballot petition to create a new independent investigation of 9/11 with subpoena power, and the creation of the city office of Attorney General. And the information is online, nyc911initiative.org. Okay, we hope you will participate. Gordon is holding up a form right there. If you have not signed this form, if you're a New York City voter, you can sign this petition to help us get this on the ballot, which is literally, folks, this is literally the most promising, the most powerful, progressive political action that we can take that has ever been presented to us since the events of 9/11. This ballot initiative. So, we'd like you to make sure you sign the form. We'd like, if you're a New York City voter, we'd like to help, your help, to volunteer, to gather petitions. We're out every week, and several of you have done very well in getting signatures, and we really appreciate every single one that you've gotten, and it's making a difference. Also, a couple other announcements. We are here every Sunday night in the back room. It's called the Parish House. We have what's called the 9/11 Info Resource Series every Sunday. And make sure you check our schedule. We have the flyer in the back where you have the website and the phone number. You can check our schedule. Tomorrow evening at 6:30, we're showing a film of a lecture by a whistleblower named Kevin Ryan, who used to work for Underwriters Laboratories. And Underwriters Laboratories is the organization that's certified the steel used to build the World Trade Towers. This gentleman has analyzed the National Institute of Standards and Technology's report in their attempt to explain what brought down the towers. Kevin Ryan. And when you hear his analysis of the discrepancies, the deceptions, the fake science, literally, faulty and fake science in the NIST report. When you hear that, you will be armed, folks, with information that anybody trying to challenge you, say, oh, you're not an expert, you need to listen to what the experts say. Well, here, we do have experts that literally illustrate how the official scientific report by the government is faulty. So we'll be showing that film tomorrow evening at 6:30. And next, folks, we have a very special guest that I'd like to bring up for a few minutes. Hopefully you all know about the plight of the valiant first responders that rose to the call of duty after the attacks of 9/11. These are people from the fire department, from the NYPD, the EMT, the city trades that showed up at the ground zero in the time of need. And these are people of the highest character. All they care about is to help when there's trouble. And this gentleman I'm going to bring up is one of those. He's an auxiliary fire department member, also is auxiliary NYPD, and he's a tireless researcher, knows the history of our political systems, the history of false flag terror, and he was there the morning of 9/11 and for weeks afterwards. And he's going to tell you a little bit about what his experience was, and he's going to also give us some of his thoughts about why we truly need a new and independent investigation of 9/11. Please welcome Paul Isaac Jr.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before anything, we're going to have a moment of silence for our fallen soldiers and our first responders that we lost on 9/11. So I ask that we give a moment of silence for these people, because no one is remembering them in government, so we're going to remember them here. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Paul Isaac Jr. I've been with the fire department for 15 years going now. I'm a former auxiliary police officer. I was 6th Command, Brooklyn South, 17th Command, Manhattan Central. And I'm going to tell you right now, everything you've heard about 9/11 from the official source, the so-called official source, is a lie. Okay? It's imperative that as Americans, we demand an investigation and an answer. And the only way that we're going to get that is if we stand in their face and let them know that we're there watching them. 9/11 was a tragedy that should never have happened. Our military was boondoggled. You're never going to fly 4 planes around this country without an intercept procedure going into effect as soon as you lose voice communication with air traffic control. Those procedures were not followed. As we know from the Norman Mineta testimony, supposedly Cheney said the order still stood. We'd like to know what order was still standing if our military was stood down. The fact that we lost 343 FDNY firefighters, too many first responders, too many. One is too many. The fact that 6 years after 9/11, we're in such trouble in this country that our borders are wide open, our military is all over the world fighting wars that are illegal. This is a war of aggression. This is what the Nuremberg trials put Hitler and the Nazis on trial for, and we are repeating the same act of the war of aggression against poor nations and innocent people. The only reason why we went to Iraq was because Iraq was demanding their oil be paid in euros. The only way we're going to Iran is because they're demanding their property be paid in yen. The US dollar is declining. As of last check, the US dollar was $1.37 compared to the euro. We are in financial trouble. These multinational corporations have no allegiance to this country, as we see how they're going to China and India and all these other countries that will support them with cheap labor so that they can continue to make profits. Our union standards are declining. Our union workers are being broken left and right. That's why they want this North American Union, so that they can continue to offshore our corporations and keep the profits in their pocket while the American people suffer in poverty. This country is going into a second world status from a first world status. The only way that we can continue to protect this country financially is to establish a new form of currency, since we know that the current currency is fraud and is causing the national debt to go out of control. Now, regarding 9/11, I didn't make it for the initial impact of the towers with the planes. I was going by on the northbound N&R train at Cortlandt Street as the beginning of it transpired. As I was traveling northbound to my regular job, because I'm only auxiliary, I'm backup reserves for civil defense. The people rushed the train in a panic state. You know, I thought there might have been a shooting or something on board and it caused the people to rush the train. But upon inquiring with the people, I was shocked. I was told that planes had hit the building. And I said to myself, no, this can't be happening. You're not going to tell me that the planes just hit these towers when we have a secured area over New York City that was supposed to be established after the '93 bombing. The '93 bombing happened during the Clinton era, and he was supposed to have a war on terror. And unfortunately, he was too busy in the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky to concentrate on his war on terror. So the Democrats have failed us. The Republicans are failing us. We need to create a third independent party of the people, by the people, for the people. And if our politicians are going to allow this country to continue to be vulnerable to terrorist attacks, even though they seem to be aware of things that we don't, I find it highly suspicious. It's like predicting that the bank down the block is going to get robbed on Monday at 11 o'clock. How do you know this? And why don't you do anything to stop it? If they knew that the towers were going to be impacted by the August 6th presidential daily briefing, why did the Secret Service not place the president in protective custody on 9/11? Why did they allow him to continue talking to children when that was not a priority event? Why did Jeb Bush place the state of Florida under an emergency status on September 7th? And is that indication of pre-knowledge of something that the rest of the country was totally unaware of? Can we call that treason when you fail to protect the American people as the American president? If you choose not to protect the people, then you should be removed. Now, we need to hold these politicians on a contractual basis. If they say they're going to do things before they get into office and fail to adhere to those promises when they are in office, then that is an automatic default and there should be a new election. Now, if the people are not going to be protected by our elected federal officials, then we need to bring it back to the state level. And that's why I call for everyone to start saving water, start saving your food, get generators, because if they keep playing around with the scarers and terrorism nonsense, you know, we can only take but so much of that nonsense until people start getting fed up and they decide to do something about it. And now we are tired of being tired of being tired. Our soldiers are dying left and right in Iraq when this war was never supposed to be happening, because they lied, because they said WMDs in 45 minutes, according to Blair. According to Blair, he stated that Saddam Hussein had the capacity to launch nuclear, biological, chemical weapons in 45 minutes. And yet, when we got there, it was not there. So we should have been packing our bags and bringing them back home now. Then, tomorrow, yesterday, bring the troops home now, so we can properly protect our northern and our southern borders properly, okay? Because our National Guard troops have just been cut in half patrolling the southern border, okay? So if we're not going to protect our borders and our elected officials are going to be acting against the people, then they are not for the people, and they are not of the people, and they are not by the people. That means you get out of office. So I dedicate this to Mr. Bob Bowman. I'm sorry he had to leave, but we have to remember that it is imperative that if we don't protect this country, we are in extreme danger. And we will not go through a 9/11 process without holding those accountable who are responsible for it. Now let's get into 9/11, because it's imperative that you are aware that those individuals that built those towers, such as David and Nelson Rockefeller, they were actually going to be called the Rockefeller Towers, were in league with Hitler during World War II with Standard Oil of New Jersey. It was Hitler's plan to hit New York City skyscrapers with suicide planes, with the Messerschmitt planes that they were going to use to suicide these buildings. It just seems funny to me that the Rockefellers, as half owners of IG Farben, were never prosecuted for trading with the enemy. And Prescott Bush, who was involved with Standard Oil of New Jersey at Auschwitz, never got prosecuted either. These people who are in power now were brought into power during the Nixon and Ford administration. You see, Ford was the unelected, was it Gerald Ford, right? Gerald Ford, that was the one that just passed away, Gerald Ford, right? Yeah, he was the unelected president. Nobody elected him to president. How did he become president under Nixon? Well, these people have been doing this since the 60s. And when you look at the Kennedy assassination and who he ran against, when he ran against Nixon, the person who supported Nixon was Prescott Bush. He was backing Nixon. So when Nixon lost the election to JFK, they had to eliminate that, because JFK was looking to disband the Central Intelligence Agency. He was looking to disband the Federal Reserve. That's why those $2 bills came out that were marked Department of Treasury instead of Federal Reserve. But somehow he got a bullet in his head, and it just seemed strange to me that his car had no Secret Service detail protecting the car. Even though when you look at the back of the president's car and you see the two handlebars that are there, there were supposed to be two Secret Service agents that were supposed to be protecting him. And they knew that there was a threat to his life. Why was the Secret Service removed from that detail? Why were there 6 cars on the car behind the president when there were only supposed to be 4 and 2 on the president's car? So when you look at the cover-up of the magic bullet, it's the same as 9/11. 9/11 is a repeat of the Kennedy assassination. Because after 9/11, this government repeated the same act as Hitler did when the Reichstag burned down. He created the Patriot Act, which is the same as the Enabling Act. He created the blind war on terror, and he had Homeland Security, Fatherland Security. So we see that this Nazi program is back into effect. Apparently, Hitler wrote a second book that was called The New World Order. And in that book, they stated that the powers that be would be moved from Germany to the United States, and that they would continue this operation of oppression and war of aggression here. When you look at Cheney's family, he's got Nazi people in his family, Schwarzenegger's family, Bush's family, Carl Rove's family, you know, they're all background Nazis. This is a danger to this country, and I'll be damned if we're going to allow another 9/11 attack to occur here without putting up a fight to defend this country. We are against all enemies, foreign and domestic and corporate. Let's not be fooled by the corporate industry's media mouthpieces such as NBC, CBS, and ABC. Because when you look at the background of NBC, you see that they're tied into General Electric, which makes the jet engine planes that go on the bombers and fighter planes that go off to destroy other countries in the name of us, the U.S. That doesn't represent us. I don't think of killing people for profit. I don't know why our corporate industry is doing that. But I'll be damned if we're going to allow that to continue any further. You see, we are not respected because we are not in a position of power as the people. If we don't position ourselves in a position of strength and power, we will lose and we will die. Just like the innocent victims of 9/11, just like the innocent victims of Oklahoma City, just like the innocent victims of the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993, just like the Atlanta bombings, because we know who planted those bombs in Atlanta in the field. There was not just one bomb. There were several bombs that were located in the Atlanta Olympics. So this is an ongoing thing that's going on. And we know that these private contractors that came to Louisiana had a little shooting gallery after Katrina, after these poor victims were starving, without water, without food, without assistance for 4 days, as our president declared that he was not aware that this was occurring, even though we had media, even though the Mounties from Canada were there before our military personnel were there. So we have to remember that fear is nothing but a psychological illusion. When you fear something, it's because you're fearing the unknown. So if you understand your enemy, you won't fear your enemy. These people are our enemy. Halliburton, Enron, they're the ones backing all these groups, all these politicians that claim to be American politicians. They are not American politicians. They are corporate politicians. They represent the corporate industrial complex. They don't represent the people. That's why we are here. Because if they represented the people, we wouldn't be in this church discussing these matters 6 years after the most horrific attack on the United States. Now, we're going to get to 9/11 because if you remember that South Tower tilt, 2 months preceding the 9/11 attacks, Keyspan Maspeth holders were demolished in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. If you do the math, you'll see that the Keyspan Maspeth holders were 400 feet high. The tilt was 400 feet high in the South Tower. Now you'll notice that everything crashed into Austin Tobin Plaza. That's not natural. When you see the radio antenna on the North Tower collapse, it collapsed the same direction as the South Tower. Everything collapsed into Austin Tobin Plaza, which proves that this is a controlled demolition, because you would not have something so controlled happening in a surprise event. The fact that there were companies in the World Trade Center that had moved out previous to the attack also leaves a lot of suspicion that needs to be investigated. The fact that Giuliani was still in charge, even though he was supposed to be leaving office, he was removing records, which is grand larceny number 3, I believe, the theft of city administrative records. That's grand larceny. The fact that his company, along with Bernard Carrick's taser, which caused the death of over 180 people in this country because of his invention, they're making profits. They don't serve us. They never did. When Giuliani's policies of slaughtering innocent people in New York City via the New York City Police Department was occurring, what did he do? One case in particular, Patrick Dorismond, this man was innocent. The man said no to drugs. When the police asked him if he had drugs, the police murdered him. What did Giuliani do? He exposed this man's youth records to prove or to show that the police are innocent because the man committed crime in his youth. That makes absolutely no sense. The police are only going to keep doing this until the people have had enough. You know, I'm not anti-cop because I know that they have a job to perform. But when the bosses and the powers that be state under the CompStat program that you have to have X amount of tickets, X amount of arrests, then you're putting pressure on the police to make up arrests, to make up summonses, to make up, you know, BS cases, because that's the only way you're going to keep those numbers going. You have to protect your rights. These politicians won't listen to you unless you have a big name behind you or a big lawyer, and unfortunately, we as common people, we don't have that. Right now, I'm going through a problem with the Brooklyn Public Library. They're destroying the library system. Anybody looking for information on this, there's a website, Mark Fisher, tied into Enron since 1998, providing them with natural gas, and still in business with them even after 9/11, before Enron collapsed for some strange reason. And now you see all these baseball stadiums being made. And they imported the Keyspan tanks. A month preceding that, they created Keyspan Park. And when Christy Todd Whitman said that the air was clean to breathe, her husband was tied into Citigroup. Now the Mets get into a stadium called Citi Field. When you look at the companies that were doing business with Enron, inflating their stock value, such as JP Morgan Chase, they get the new Yankee Stadium. This was the records that Giuliani was removing from office, plus I'm sure a whole bunch of other things. But this was part of the contract removal that he started shredding in his own private shredding and storage operation in Queens. So the people have to demand answers. Because so long as they keep scapegoating the issues and, you know, circumventing the truth, we're in trouble. And they're only waiting for one more terrorist attack to call full martial law. And when martial law is enacted, habeas corpus is out the window, habeas corpus, the rights to a trial, the right to see a lawyer. Just look at what happened with Jose Padilla. Now they can't even nail him with the original crime that they wanted to get him for, a dirty bomber. How long does it take this person to be in a military brig and federal prison, you know, before they realize they have no evidence on him? So it's imperative that you start saving water, you start stocking provisions. Because if you have water and the water goes off, you're safe. If you have food and the dollar collapses, you're safe. If you network with your neighbors. See, this is a problem in New York, is that New Yorkers don't really network with each other. We're so independent-minded that we don't know how to get back to community base. So it's imperative that you get to know your neighbor and you work to protecting yourself and to preserving yourself, your family, and protecting your family. It's imperative. Because we don't want to wait for another 9/11 to occur before we go would've, could've, and should've. Because then it'll be too late. So take the time that we have now, because that's all we got before they pull off another stunt. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. God bless you.
I tell you, be special. The man was there. Okay? Got to know Paul and gotten to hear the information that he shared from his experience, very much so, and it's really very important to know what the first responders have gone through, okay, and what they continue to go through, and also the fact that the government have just left them high and dry. So we have to work together to take care of the first responders as they took care of us. And just one last announcement, folks. Next Saturday, we're going to do something extra special and different. Doesn't it make sense that with all the hard work we do as actors, we should also get to party once in a while? Next Saturday, dance party right here, soul, rhythm, and blues, and some Latin music right here. Okay? Listen to the hotline or check our website. By the middle of the week, we'll have all the details down, okay? But this is going to be a benefit for the 9/11 ballot initiative. So we hope you join us and bring about 50 to 100 folks, okay, everybody? Great, thanks for being here. Good night.
Probably not. Oh wait, maybe let me go see.